Well, welcome tonight to Currituck Resource Center. We're talking about 10 signs of depression, and so if you have kept up with these videos up to this point, you will know the different signs that we have gone through. Right now we want to talk about low self-esteem, and let us just remember that these conversations that we are having here are just simply to help us try to understand and see, maybe recognize things in our own lives, or recognize things in the lives of others that certainly can make a difference and certainly can help as they struggle with different types or different parts of depression. So low self-esteem. Want to talk about low self-esteem just a little bit. This low self-esteem is one of the things that when it comes into a part of depression, we really begin to notice. One of the main keys that you will notice is an individual will start to become self-focused or focused inwardly on self and the challenges that they go through or are going through, depending on the situation. Let me just touch on that for just a little bit, because in depression can be something that goes on for an extended period of time. I think we've already talked a little bit about that. So sometimes in the early stages of depression, there could be an event or a situation that actually started the process into depression, and the person will stay stuck on that particular situation in their life, and it will continue to replay and replay and replay in their mind constantly. And the more it replays, then the lower they think of themselves, or the worse things will get. And so sometimes in this area of self-esteem, then there'll be a continual downward spiral into this idea of frustration and doubt. And as this spiral continues downward, then you can see a person really begin to change, their countenance begin to change. And so sometimes maybe if you just met the individual in some way, shape, or form, it may take a little bit of time to get to know them. But one of the things that you can look at if you have just met an individual, maybe a sign that you would begin to ask yourself to be aware of is if there is one particular event that the person focuses on constantly. And when this happened, then everything from that point went downhill. Or when this happened, I can no longer do this or feel like I can do that. Those kinds of things. And I think we all know sometimes an individual where we get into a situation where they keep talking about the same story over and over again, and have to tell you what happened. So what are the things then with low self-esteem? With each one of these sessions, as you have watched the videos before, we have this see and hear section that we want to talk about, because this is the place where we need to engage in conversations to really try to help individuals. And so I want to take less time explaining things about the sign and more time talking about how you and I can actually help engage, or maybe how you and I can identify if we are in the early stages of feeling depressed in some way, shape, or form. So when we talk about self-esteem, one of the things that we've already noted is how they focus on an event. But in the depths of an individual, when they begin to have this low self-esteem, that can either bring on depression, or depression can actually bring on the feelings of low self-esteem. And so you kind of have to look both ways. But oftentimes the continual frustration about that event or multiple events is what really can begin to lead a person into that spiral where they are just stuck on this one thing. And I don't know if any of you have ever watched a movie or have been watching a TV program, and all of a sudden the TV frame freezes, or maybe you have a DVR and you pause the program, and that place that you have paused it is just stuck right there. Now, that's really what we're talking about that can lead heavily into self-esteem issues, because in their mind they are still focused on, and their mind is paused in that. And so the only thing that they can picture is that situation. And it happens a lot of times too, if an individual is verbally or physically abused as well. It certainly can lead to this issue. A person can be very strong, very confident, and be affected by some sort of verbal or physical abuse by a parent or grandparent or coworker or a spouse, or whatever that is, and it can take a confident person and turn them into a real person of doubt and fear in a lot of ways. And so what happens is there's these freeze frames that are in their brains that have these times or situations of pain and hurt, and that frame stays there in front of them. And so even if somebody is trying to help them, even if a person does come along and try to have a conversation with them or try to help them, that freeze frame is still there, and they can't even see past that help. And so if you're trying to help a person in that situation, understand the frustration, understand the doubt, understand the uncertainty in their lives, and be patient with them, because oftentimes if you're the one trying to help them, you're feeling like you're doing the best that you can, and they're looking back at you and they're responding back at you with anger, frustration, doubt, disappointment, those kinds of things, and it's not towards you, it's still towards that freeze frame that they have in their mind. So be patient and be willing to walk with someone through that. And then I've put down a few thoughts that can really assist that freeze frame that we're talking about. Because if a person is told or something is acted towards that person, they begin to believe something about them that is not true. And that is really, really hard sometimes to overcome in your mind when you constantly have that freeze frame that you are looking at, and you're visibly seeing when someone is trying to speak or talk or help in some way. And then even sometimes they can get even more frustrated at that point, and they become very critical of themselves as well. And sometimes even without depression, we can have these thoughts and feelings and ideas, and so it's helpful for us to understand them, and it's helpful for us to really find individuals who we can surround ourselves with, and in order to help in that. Then you get a little bit one step further, where a person will actually start feeling bad about the situation. In other words, they have their self-esteem is being attacked, and they're struggling with that, and yet somewhere deep down inside, that even though they're believing in a lie, in some way they begin to accept the fact that they're no good, but they know they shouldn't be. And so there is this conflict that happens, and it is that mixture of the low self-esteem and what we call self-loathing, as it were. I really shouldn't be doing this, but I do it anyway, and I know I'm not supposed to be doing this, but the only way I can feel good about myself is to try to do this anyway, and so you become very, very critical of yourself in that way. So this combination of low self-esteem and self-loathing can get very, very difficult at times for individuals. One of the things that I think we need to kind of talk about as we really wrap up this sign of depression is I want to talk a little bit about us as a helper. Because sometimes even as a helper, we have to battle through our own thoughts and our own feelings of low self-esteem and low self-worth in that way. And it's really, really good that we don't engage in that person. In other words, saying something like a person says, well, I'm just no good. Most of us don't want to come back and say, well, no, you're really not, and then kind of laugh. because it really is not good for that person. You're not trying to just make that person feel better by doing something about that, because there is a tipping point when it comes to low self-esteem. There is a tipping point that a person comes to that actually says that if I make myself feel worse, I'll feel better about the situation that I'm in. And it's really a conflict of interest that is within the individual. And so that person does not know how to verbalize that difference. That person does not understand how to communicate that. And many times we don't, because we don't really understand what's going on inside. We just have this feeling that something is not right. And so that's why really as a helper we need to be very patient and ask questions and be willing to walk beside people, because this tipping point that I was talking about is the tipping point where a person begins to do something to themselves that is hurtful. And it's really kind of strange to some people that another person would want to take some sort of knife or razor blade or whatever that is and harm themselves or cut themselves. But that is an action where a person has this conflict going on inside, does not understand how to communicate it, does not understand what they're feeling, because they have this conflict of, I shouldn't be feeling that way, but I am feeling that way. And so the only way to mask that pain is to draw pain from somewhere else in some other way. And so it's very, very difficult in that situation. And I just mentioned one, meaning cutting, but there's a lot of other ways that people will act out, and I'm not really going to take a long time to discuss the different ways that people act out, but there's a lot of times that there are a cry for help. Anger sometimes can be a cry for help, oftentimes it's not. Anger most of the time is something that pushes a person away, is meant to push a person away so you don't have to deal with it, versus cutting, some self-harm in some way, shape, or form. Drug overdose is another way. One of the reasons that we're talking about the 10 signs of depression is because depression is the number one leading cause of suicide, and even an attempted opportunity to take your life is something that could be a cry for help as well. So those are the signs I think we really need to be able to be aware of, because it's interesting, because the person is still conflicted. So the person is trying to draw attention to their inward pain by doing something externally, and yet at the same time they're struggling with this thought that they are the only ones that are suffering. Nobody will understand. That would be another key. Well, you just don't understand what I'm going through. You don't understand what it's like. One of the things that is very helpful, you don't have to be a counselor. You just have to have a desire to love on people and to help them. Because you can simply say to a person, I help me understand. I want to understand. And a situation like that. And me personally, I've even gone to the point of saying, I'm not going to leave here until you try to describe to me in some way what's going on inside. And sometimes that raw emotion will come out, and you just have to let that person talk. That's a part of the healing process. But if you aren't able to do that, or if that person doesn't get help, they'll just go into more and more isolation and separation, because they're at a place where they don't believe that anybody, it hurts as bad as what they do. And so it's an opportunity for us just to begin to help out. There are other ways that you can help a person who has low self-esteem. We're actually talking about low self-esteem in a sense of what it means leading into depression. And there are other videos that we'll do in the future that actually talk about low self-esteem just as an individual in the way that we are wired, and we'll deal with that in another video, because that in and of itself, there are great ways that we can help individuals deal with the feelings and thoughts of low self-esteem just as an individual, and yet they're not really depressed. So that's for another time. So I hope this helps, and I hope this video will just kind of encourage you to see things maybe in your own life that you can find healing in. That's what we at the CRC are here for. The Courage Chuck Resource Center is here to be able to help you in that. And so if we can help you in any way, just let us know.